Well, we mentioned this briefly yesterday, but it's really turned into a thing. And this is Donald Trump's remarks about Andrew Jackson, and as a thing, I think it goes way beyond that. I you know, I watch Donald Trump on television. I listen to him on the radio. I get the clips on the internet, whatever. And it seems like he's got good days and bad days. It seems like there are times when his brain is working well, and there's times when he just seems really confused. And, that's typically associated with early stage dementia, but it could also just be, the guy having a bad day. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going, foggy on us. That said, I'm concerned that there are, not concerned, I mean, I'm thinking, it's looking to me like there are some Republicans who are looking at the possibility of maybe a 25th Amendment solution to the problem that they have with Donald Trump. Now, in many regards, Donald Trump has done exactly what the billionaires want, him being one himself, particularly with the tax thing, although it really wasn't a tax proposal. It was a one-page bullet-pointed piece of paper. It was just something, Trump demanded that somebody put together in time for, his 100 days. There is no Trump tax plan right now. There are suggestions for a possible tax plan, but nobody's developed one. But you start to wonder, you look at how he's behaving and what's being done, and, is he getting erratic and all this, or is it that actually some Republicans, now I know there are Democrats speaking out about this as well, but the Republicans are the ones that really amaze me. So first of all, here's an audio clip of Donald Trump talking about Andrew Jackson.
Had Andrew Jackson been a little bit later, you wouldn't have had the Civil War. He was a very tough person, but he had a big heart, and he was really angry that he saw what was happening with regard to the Civil War. He said, there's no reason for this. People don't realize, the Civil War, you think about it, why? People don't ask that question. But why was there the Civil War? Why could that one not have been worked out?
Because the South wasn't willing to let go of their slaves. I mean, it's just real simple. And he's, Andrew Jackson would have solved the problem. Right. Well, Andrew Jackson, this Deneen Brown did some great research, or maybe this was easy to find. I was unfamiliar with it, but I'm not an Andrew Jackson historian. I'm pretty competent in the area from 1760 to 1808, but, Andrew Jackson came after that, and that's not an era of American history. I mean, I know the broad brushes, but in 1804, Andrew Jackson was, just a Tennessee slave owner. When he died, he had 150 slaves. I'm not sure how many he had in 1804. And he placed an ad in the Tennessee Gazette in October of 1804 that, well, actually, this is in the era that I'm familiar with. I mean, this was the last year of the first term of Thomas Jefferson's presidency, who was also a slaveholder. And Andrew Jackson's ad, his advertisement, had a picture of a slave, and the headline said, "Stop the runaway." And then underneath that, it said, "A mulatto man slave, about 30 years old, 6 feet and an inch high, stout-made and active, talks sensible, stoops in his walk, and has a remarkably large foot broad across the toes, will pass for a free man." And he said a reward of $50 plus reasonable expenses, and for $10 extra for every 100 lashes any person will give him, to the amount of 300. So catch my slave and give him 300 lashes. Rip the skin from his body, and I will pay you. That's the guy who's on our $20 bill. That's the guy who Donald Trump said, if he had been president, there wouldn't have been a civil war. Well, maybe not. Maybe he would have simply said to the southern states, okay, fine, secede. Or maybe he would have said to the southern states, okay, I'm on your side. We're going to force slavery on the northern states. I mean, who knows? But Andrew Jackson was a cruel man. I mean, this is the guy who initiated the Trail of Tears, who killed, who moved 100,000 Cherokee Native Americans, Indians, from Georgia to Oklahoma, and over 15,000 of them died along the way. After, by the way, the Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional. So anyhow, back to my original point is, so we've got this, and this is just the latest thing. Then he's also saying, oh, yeah, I'd be honored to meet Kim Jong-un. And his staff and the people at the State Department are going, what? You don't say that. That's how you close the deal. You don't start a negotiation by saying, yeah, I'll recognize you. You say, you know, if you want to have a meeting with me, you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and then we can get together and we can be friends. And then he calls up Duterte, the guy who's running the Philippines, who has bragged when he was the mayor of Duval City, I think it is called, or Davao City. Davao City? Davao City. Okay, whatever it is. Thank you, Troy. When he was the mayor of this city in the Philippines, he bragged about how he personally murdered a man. And he hired police officers, and he hired mercenaries, and this is well documented, to simply walk up to drug users, not just drug dealers, users, put a gun to their head and pull a trigger. 9,000 of them so far. The guy's only been president for, what, 6 months? And Trump calls him up and says, hey, let's get together. Come on over to Washington, D.C., to the White House. Well, Trump this fall is opening a new Trump Tower in Manila in the Philippines. You think that might have something to do with it? But back again to my original point, which is how Republicans are spinning this. The 25th Amendment of the Constitution, it says essentially that if a president becomes disabled, think Reagan with his Alzheimer's in the last 2 years of his presidency, although it was very well concealed, but he was gone. Or think Nixon just being nutty, particularly in the last year. Or maybe think Donald Trump. The 25th Amendment says that basically his cabinet can remove him from office and initiate this process that removes the president. And I'm wondering if there are some Main Street Republicans who don't like the direction that Donald Trump is going, particularly when it comes to things like trade, who are saying, you know, we got to get rid of this guy and put a conventional, Mike Pence guy in there. Just a good old-fashioned corporate shill who's not going to rock the boat on any of this stuff and is not going to, he's just a little too wacky. And that, this morning on Morning Joe Scarborough made a comment that, I was watching that and going, I wonder if he is speaking on behalf, because arguably outside of Fox News, Joe Scarborough is the most powerful open Republican on network television. It's the #1 rated show on MSNBC. It's on every morning for 3 hours. It changes things. In fact, I would say if it wasn't for Joe Scarborough's show, Donald Trump wouldn't be president right now, because Scarborough gave him a platform for years, and particularly, up to and through the primaries. But in any case, here's what Scarborough had to say. Listen to this and just ask yourself, is he trying to set something up for the Republicans to remove this guy from office? Here it is.
What was the line from the Civil War? Why didn't
he's talking to John Meacham.
Asked this question before?
Why didn't anyone work that one out?
Yeah, but he started, but nobody has asked this question before. But why did we even have a Civil War? My mother's had dementia for 10 years. That sounds like the sort of thing my mother would say today. Like, people, she would say, people don't ask that question. Why did we have a Civil War? It's beyond the realm. That is something.
Yeah. And then Mika.
Trying to be anything here, but very direct. That's something that a 5-year-old might ask, but that is not anything that any grown-up that I have ever been around in my entire life would ever let pass from their lips.
Yeah. So is Trump developing dementia or not? I'm suspecting it's just normal 70. He's 70 or 71 now. I think it's just, the normal stuff that comes with aging. But I could be wrong. I think he's a narcissist, and I think he's probably a sociopath. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind he's a narcissist. I can give you a psychological diagnosis that I think renders him unfit for office. But if they can stick dementia on him, they can remove him from office. And then we end up with Mike Pence. And I'm, you know, they're both poison in my mind. But I'm wondering if Limbaugh and all the right-wingers are out there going, hey, wait a minute, you know, is the Tuesday group, are the so-called moderate Republicans that Joe Scarborough kind of represents on television, are they getting ready to try to take this guy out? Because it looks like he's hurting the party electorally, particularly in 2018. It's coming. It's going to be bad. And this is, you know, maybe Trump is developing dementia, or maybe he's just, you know, with regard to things like Duterte and Kim, you know, saying, oh, yeah, I'd love to meet these guys. You know, I think not. I think that it's that Trump, from everything I've been able to watch, Trump, first of all, he was born rich. He was basically given his real estate empire by his father, who, by the way, was refusing to rent to people of color and was busted for it. You know, a racist. He grew up in this world where he was a princeling. He was a prince. And, you know, he inherited this kingdom, essentially. And so, and he's 71 years old, 70 or 71 years old, and his entire life, he has basically had command and control of everything around him. And he said, you know, jump, and people said, how high, sir? And if they didn't, he replaced them immediately. So the guy is used to being an autocrat. He's an oligarch. He's an American oligarch. And oligarchs tend to be very fond of autocracies, autocratic governments, strongman governments. And look at what he's doing. Erdogan in Turkey gets a referendum passed that basically, you know, blows holes in the Constitution, does away with the ability of the legislature to oversee the executive, and allows Erdogan to stay you know, as president until I think 2026, by which time he'll probably be dead. I mean, I think he's in his mid-60s, but who knows? I mean, but in any case, Erdogan has, you know, he's just gutting democracy, and Trump calls him up and congratulates him. Duterte in the Philippines is literally hiring murderers. I think it was Slate magazine. It might have been Salon did this whole long story. We did this story on the air maybe a month or so ago. Richard Green was here talking about it as well. He was the advisor to one of Duterte's opponents in the election, in the Filipino election. And you know, here's a guy who is literally, you know, paying $100, $200 a head to murder people. And 9,000 people have been murdered in the months that he's been president of the Philippines. Trump calls him up and invites him to D.C. Now, I get it. Trump is opening a Trump hotel, a Trump tower, a Trump building in the Philippines, in Manila, the capital city of the Philippines, later on this year. I get that. And that might be the whole reason why he did it. But I think not. I think he likes strongman dictators because he himself thinks that's the role of president. It's not just that he wants that. It's not just that that's how he governs, because that's how he's always governed his companies. Not just that. It's that he thinks that's the natural order of things. There's an amazing, you can find it on YouTube, there's an amazing montage of Trump talking about how he's got good genes. It's in the genes. You know, my smarts are in my genes. My entrepreneurism is in my genes. There are other people who don't have this, and it's not in their genes. You know, Trump actually believes in theories of genetic superiority and inferiority. I mean, he's come right out and said it over and over again. And you know, which is typically, I mean, this is what when Herbert Spencer, Charles Darwin's nephew or cousin, took Darwin's research, and Spencer was an economist. This was, you know, back in the 1870s. And as I recall, and Spencer took Darwin's research and turned it into a survival of the fittest economic rationale, created a whole rationale for a hierarchical, pseudo-feudal economic system based on, quote, survival of the fittest. And you know, kind of, you know, reinvented that whole take. Well, Trump has completely bought into that. And that was the basis for eugenics. here in the United States in the 1920s and in the UK. The eugenics movement became the basis in the 1930s for Hitler's move of Blut und Erde to purify the German race. And we saw how well that worked out. And you know, this is, so I don't think this guy is ignorant. I think that he is deluded and uninformed about American history, because I don't think he really cares that much about American history.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
But I'm pleased to hear your observations and what you think is going on here. And where do you think the Republicans are going with this stuff? I mean, he just had a huge loss on the budget.